John chapter 6. John chapter 6. We come to the place where Jesus did his fourth miracle. Actually, the fourth sign that John talks about. He did do a lot of other miracles in the process, but the fourth sign that John talked about, the master's sign that John talked about, which shows who Jesus is, the divinity of, which proves the divinity of Jesus Christ. We saw last week how Jesus jumped distances in order to do miracles. We saw that one of the biggest lessons I think we have learned last week is our assumptions, for better or for worse, determine the outcomes of our lives. Our assumptions about anything determine what we actually get out of our lives. You get what you expect. So if you make too many false assumptions about God, about yourself, you do get wrong returns back to you. That's why I asked you to make just one assumption, that God is able to do miracles in your life. That's all you need to believe in. That's all. That's the only assumption you need to make, because with God, all things are possible. And if you believe that, and you will see then that all things in your life become possible. That's the lesson that we have learned, that this man who laid beside that pool for 38 years, or at least ended up at the pool for 38 years in order to experience a miracle, had to break his assumption in order to see a new miracle happen in his life. Today, we will look at another miracle that John talked about in John chapter 6. This is so familiar a story for us, sometimes we can switch off our minds the moment we see feeding the 5,000. We have heard it from our childhood, we've gone to Sunday schools, heard this story so many times. Sometimes, because we are so familiar with the story, we can miss some very important lessons that the story talks about. I'm just going to read the story for you. For those of you who do not know the story, listen to this. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him, because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up onto the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes, then, and seeing that a great crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish." Where are my barley loaves? While he arranges, let me continue the story. And 2 fish, but what are they for so many? Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." In the ancient time, that's about 2,000 years back, when Jesus performed this miracle, the population of Galilee was around 40,000. Now, I actually think that the biblical theologians who had segregated the Bible into chapters and verses had done a great injustice in talking about this miracle, because they titled it as feeding 5,000. But it was feeding 5,000 men alone, isn't it? Now imagine that these men had wives and children. You are talking about at least 20,000 people in that gathering. That is why it was called a large gathering. When Jesus went up to the mount and sat down, he saw a large crowd coming towards him. So you're talking great numbers. 20,000 is not a small number. Last 2 days back, on Friday night, I saw how a great crowd looks like. We were 2 days back. I was in Chennai for 3 days because the Assemblies of God was celebrating 100 years in India. So that means in 2016 we have completed 100 years as an organization in our country. So all the AG churches all across India had come together, and we had this brilliant celebration, and had one of the greatest pastors that we know of the 20th century had come down to speak to us, Paul Angicho, David Angicho, as he called now. And when we gathered together for that evening meeting, as much as we could lift up our eyes and see, it was just people filled. The entire YMCA at Nandanam was packed to the core. It took at least an hour and a half for us to just walk out of the stadium to get onto the main road. It's just about 500 meters. Now imagine the same crowd following Jesus onto the mount. Jesus calls up Philip and says, "Hey, let's give food to these guys." Now Jesus called Philip for a reason, because Philip comes from Bethsaida, which is about 5 miles and let's say 9 kilometers away from the mount that Jesus was in. So it's obvious that Jesus had to ask Philip, because Philip probably is familiar with where all the bakeries are. So probably Jesus asked Philip, "Hey, can we get bread from any bakery that we can?" Now Philip began to make a mathematical calculation, and as he began to calculate, he saw the number. He knew there would be at least 20,000 people, and even if he had enough money to buy food for them, he knows the bakeries will not be able to deliver the goods on time. This is too many to feed. And that's what he said. 200 denarii would not be enough. That would be half year's age. Even if we collected all the money that we've got and go ahead and buy, and if the baker had actually managed to give the food, deliver the food, we would still not be able to feed them on time and give them enough. There was an article that I was reading. It's a hospitality magazine, and it talks about a manual called Convention Industry Council Manual, which basically did a research and gave a statistic that if we want to do a banquet, arrange a banquet, and have everybody sit, because Jesus did ask everybody to sit down, you know that, right? He asked to make everybody sit down, and he asked them to make them sit down in the hundreds and fifties. That means even if there are 5,000 people, you're talking about 50 rows. And if there are 200 people, imagine at least 200 rows. If in each line there are 100 people sitting down. Now, so this convention manual says, in order to make a person seated in a banquet, you need at least 13 and a half square feet of space. You know what it means, right? You need that space in order to feed that person. Based on that calculation, you need to make these people sit down at least for 6.2 acres. That's a place that needs to cover. For making 20,000 people sit around 6 acres and start actually serving them, you need, even if You put one server, one waiter for 10 people, you need 200 minimum. You got 12 people there. So he's doing all this calculation, and he's looking at Jesus, and his expression is, that's not possible. This is a logistical and financial nightmare. Sometimes our lives encounter problems like that, logistical and financial nightmares. Sometimes when God asks us to do certain things, they do seem too big. You probably, like Philip, starts analyzing your problem, start looking at the number as you start crunching those numbers and wondering, is this really possible? Can we actually do this? But Jesus changed the arithmetic on that day. You know, there's a guy called Frank. This is just a thought, okay? This has nothing to do with my message. I just wanted to pull this fellow. This guy called Francois White, a French mathematician, changed the course of history on the 16th century. By the time we reached 16th century, we had only two branches, subfields in mathematics, arithmetics and geometry. But in 16th century, this man destroyed all of our lives. He introduced the third subject called algebra. Algebra comes in the second place for the most hated subject that I have. The first one is trigonometry, of course. The second one is algebra, and the third one is calculus. But on that day, Jesus changed everything, what we call the algebra. He introduced a new equation as he taught his disciples how he can handle large crowds. Quantity doesn't matter to God. Irrespective of how big the size looks like, how big our need looks like, how big the money looks like that we need at this moment in order to get a visa, in order to apply for immigration, in order to pay for a medical fees, in order to pay for our children's school fee. It doesn't matter in order to move from this city to another city, irrespective of how big the number looks like, how big the problem, how big the logistical problem look like. For God, quantity doesn't matter. That's what he taught on that day. It doesn't matter how big your problem is, I can handle it. He wanted to teach that to Philip. Nothing is too big for God. On the first day, we saw nothing is too small for God. The reason God is great is because for God, nothing is too small. Even your fever matters. Even the absence of wine does matter in the wedding. For God, even the smallest detail matters to God. We saw that when he converted water into wine. Now we see that nothing is too big for God in this story. He did prove that point even in the Old Testament. I don't know if you have ever read the book of Numbers. You probably started January with Genesis. By the time you got to Exodus, you were in February. By the time you got to March, you were in Leviticus, and it just kept going above your head. So you kind of skipped Leviticus and Numbers, probably went to Deuteronomy, because Numbers is Numbers, if you read the book of Numbers. But Numbers has some interesting stories. If you go to Numbers chapter 11, you see a story that took place in the wilderness. These 600,000 men on foot. That means not only there are 600,000 men, but there are women and children. You got to count that also. All of them, as they are walking through the wilderness, they have encountered a problem. It actually was not a problem, but it is a very interesting situation for Moses and God. I'll tell you why God also. Now you know that God has been providing them manna every day, isn't it? From heaven. Because they don't have any other way to be provided for, God opened up heavens every day, every single day, and gave them food. So that they don't have to worry about their daily bread. That's what Jesus taught us when he asked us to pray, give us this day. What did Jesus say? Our yearly bread, isn't it? What was that? So he wanted to teach them, you can depend on God every single day of your life. And so he specifically told them, don't gather more, don't gather less. Even if you gather more, it'll be shortened enough so that you will have enough food for that day, and anything that is left over will be spoiled. Or you gather less, you still get enough food. It's a miracle that God was doing for them every single day. Now, these guys got fed up with miracles. Whoever gets fed up with miracles? Apparently, all of us do. That we see so many miracles every day happening, we start complaining to God, this is not enough, I want more miracles. And that's what they did. In the first part of chapter 11, they walked up to Moses and said, hey, we got fed up with manna, we want meat. I realized sometimes if God continues to do a lot of miracles for us, we would also come to that point where we begin to complain to God, this is not enough, I want more. Maybe some of you are there today. Be careful. Because God gets angry there. God did get angry. So he called Moses and he said, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'll feed these fellows because they want quails, right? They want meat. I'm going to give them meat. Not for one day. They wanted just a change, just for one day. But he told them, not for one day. I'll give them 2 days. Not 2 days, 5 days, not 5 days. I'll give them 10 days, not even 10 days, 20 days. No, I'll give them for a whole month. I'll give them so much meat that as they eat, it'll come out of their nostrils. That much I'll give. Have you ever seen anybody eating KFC chicken? And he did actually fulfill that promise. I'll tell you how he did that. Before I do that, let's look at Moses' reaction. Verses 21 and 22. Moses looks at God and says, how is that possible? Just like Philip, Moses started calculating the arithmetic. 600,000 standing strong men. Imagine all of them start eating, other than the wives and the children. If we have to feed the whole camp, we have to kill every single living thing that is in this camp. All the cattle, all the goats, whatever we have to kill all of them in order to give them chicken or a beef biryani, whatever biryani, on that day. And it would not even be enough for all these people, even if we have used up everything. We all do that with God, isn't it? When God promises big, when God says, I'm going to do this for you, we're always asking question, where will I get that? How is that possible? It's not possible. So God showed Moses how he does that. The next day, God opened up the skies and allowed quails to come. It seems they descended on this camp with such ferocity that they piled up around the camp on that day in the morning for as far as 1 day's walk. Let me explain that to you in mathematical terms, if you still like mathematics. In Hebrew language, when they express this expression saying 1 day's walk, it is 24 kilometers. That's about 15 miles or 17 miles. 24 kilometers. That means if a Hebrew starts at the edge of the camp and begins to walk in any direction, you're talking about 24 kilometers. There were so many quail that came on that day that they could actually walk up to 24 kilometers and still find the quails around. Now, if you square them up and multiply it with pi, you're talking about 1,126 square kilometers. That's the double size of Hyderabad metro. Do you know that? Imagine you standing right in the middle of Hyderabad and start walking. You will go to the end of Hyderabad and you'll go to another distance that's almost as far as the Hyderabad is. That many quail and 3 feet deep. 1 cubit. 1 cubit means 3 feet deep. 1 meter. At least. Wow. God really did want them to eat to the full that it would come out of their nostrils. He gave them so much. There's nothing big for God. That's what he was trying to prove to Moses. That's what he tried to prove to Philip and Andrew. Hey, number doesn't matter to me. The number that you need right now doesn't matter to me. Nothing is too big for God. That's the point he wanted to teach. That's what we see in the next verse. When you see that he said this to test them, for he himself knew what he would do. He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. God already knows what he would do in your life. God already knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Because there is nothing called past, present, and future for God. Do you know that, right? So he already knows what's going to happen in your life. And so he knows what he's going to do for you. What he does want is that you take the first step in the right direction. That's what he was trying to see if Philip would do or Andrew would do. But a child took the first step to the right direction. A child with no name. I'll talk about that guy after I make my point now. But I think this is what God was trying to teach all of us. That if you want to see miracles happen in your life, you don't just have to believe, you don't only believe that God can do great things, but I think you need to learn to obey what God asks you to do. Let me rephrase that for you. Miracles don't just happen when you believe God. That will make more sense. Miracles don't just happen when you believe in God for big things. They happen when you obey God, even in small things. Did it make sense to you right now? Again, miracles don't just happen because you believe God for big things. Miracles happen when you obey God even in small things. There is only one requirement that Jesus had from these guys: to believe that he can do it. Apparently they don't believe. Did you know that before he actually performed what we call the feeding of the 5,000, he did another miracle of the similar type even before this happened? He fed 4,000 people with 7 loaves. The disciples were there. They saw that Jesus can actually take 7 loaves, break them, and feed 4,000 people. They saw that and they still did not believe that he can do this. I actually sometimes believe that we are always in that position. We do see God doing miracles in our lives. We prayed for it and we do see happening, but apparently when another problem comes, we still go back to the old position. When you finished your BTech, some of you began to pray, God, even though I did chemical engineering, I want a software job. I don't know why we pray that, but we did pray. And some of you miraculously got a software job. I don't know how your employer gave you the job, but he did apparently. And I'm assuming that is a miracle for you. But when things get tough in your workplace, are you stressed out? You begin to complain to God that, God, why are you not doing any miracle in my life? But you already, by the virtue of you working for IBM or Microsoft, after finishing your civil engineering or a chemical engineering, you are actually experiencing miracle on an everyday basis. While sitting in the middle of a miracle that you yourself are, you're still complaining to God that you're not getting a promotion. You're not getting another job. Funny, isn't it? Just like the Israelites. God was so angry that these fellows are not thankful to him that he fed them to the full and killed them. Did you know that? Fed them full to the full. He actually gave them the miracle that they wanted and killed them then, before they can actually digest the food. So he needed to teach them, you can trust me, I can do stuff. I guess we need to do that. We need to believe that God can do big things. But we would only show that we believe by following him in small things, like sitting down in the pew. 20,000 hungry people, just imagine that. 20,000 hungry people who sat down for 3 days and listened to the word of God for 3 days, and it's a long, Jesus doesn't do short sermons like me. He does days. Of course, he's a great communicator, so you would sit down and listen to him anyway. So people would sit down for days and listen to Jesus, and apparently all the food that they had is finished. And so Jesus saw that they needed the food, and that's why he actually did the miracle. So 20,000 hungry people with children and elders and people with sugar and diabetes and all that stuff are sitting there, and they all need the food. And now Jesus asks them, sit down in a row. Now forget about those guys. They probably are hungry, so they would listen to anything you ask them to do. Imagine the 12 guys who have to ask them to sit down in a row. If I was Peter and I was asked to tell you to sit down in the row, you hungry people, and I come to you, I actually don't know what to tell you. I'm actually in a quandary, because if I tell you to sit down in the row, you're going to look at me and ask me, so what are you going to give? You got 100 people in my row. I've got 100 people in my row sitting there. I have to answer everybody. I've got 5 loaves and 2 fish to give you. Really? That's Happy Meal. You know that? For those of you who don't know what Happy Meal is, I'm really sorry for your 19th century being. What will they answer? How would they will be able to give anything that is logical that can make the hungry pangs to wait? But they had to obey. It's a small step in order to see big things from the hand of God. It's the same principle with you. Even if your job pays you less, if you know that God is asking you to take that job, you take it. That's as simple as that. Even if you know that there are some things that you love and you need to let go of, I'm going to talk about it in the next principle, but you got to be willing to do that, because that's a small step that you need to take in order to see a big miracle in your life. Miracles don't just happen when we believe God for big things, but they happen when we obey God in the little things. That's the second principle that you're going to take away today. Let me talk about third one. Verses 7. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them, even to get a little. Now one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, I'm going to do one entire sermon after this series just on that one verse, okay? I'll come back to that one verse, because there's so much to talk about that one single verse. But let me just move on to the next verse. There is a boy there who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. There is a boy there who has 5 loaves and 2 fish. Now, you've heard so much about this guy, isn't it? This little kid. I want to give you a perspective on how this boy would have given. Now, let's assume, can I have 2 volunteers on the stage? Let us assume that Peter did not snatch it from him. Neither Andrew threatened him. Let's hope that this boy willingly gave 5 loaves and 2 fish, his brown bag, his happy meal. Now the KFC box, whichever. That's what he had in his hand, isn't it? And he had to give it away. The act of this boy giving that happy meal away is the biggest miracle of all. Not the feeding 5,000 or the 20,000. Now my wife loves Kit Kat. I mean, she has a stock of them. She's not here? Is she here? She has a stock of them which she doesn't give to anybody, not even to me. If she does give Kit Kat to somebody, it simply means she loves that person more. I mean, she actually loves you if she does give you a Kit Kat. She never gave it to me, by the way. She's not here, that's why I can say anything I want. So, hold that thought, okay? If you have kids, you know what I'm going to talk about is very true. It is a major miracle to have your child to give you something, to share anything with you. Do you know that? How many of you have children? You agree with me, don't you? It is let's say it's a minor miracle compared to the next one that I'm going to talk about. It's a minor miracle to have your child to share anything with you once you give it to him. Sometimes they will not share what is yours also back to you. That's really funny. But it is a major miracle compared to that to share something that he loves. Try take Happy Meal away from your child. Try doing that. That's not possible. Children don't just give it away like that. So the precursor to one of the greatest miracles that you see in the Bible is that a child loved to give it away. Miracles begin with your willingness to give something that you love back to God. Write that down. Miracles begin with your willingness to give away something that you love the most. Now, would Jesus have done this miracle without the child giving the 5 loaves and 2 fish? Yes and no, I don't know. Jesus can create, in that sense it's yes, he can create everything out of nothing. So he probably can create food out of thin air. But that's not how God functions in the Bible. We have seen that. Last 3 miracles, we have seen that. You got to do something in the natural first. So God takes what you have first and then does a miracle out of that. So to give away something that you love is a miracle, and that miracle becomes a precursor to the bigger miracle that you're looking for. Start with that. Think through that. That boy taught me another lesson. That to give away what you need most, love most, one, but what you need most is another thing. You get the difference? Sometimes, because we are Christians, sometimes we know how much God loved us and gave us, we would be willing to give away what we love. But to give away what we need most becomes really tough. Are you listening to me? Out of the 20,000 people, this is the only kid who's got food in his hand. And that is enough for him. That was his meal. That was his, the brown box that his mom packed and gave. And he knows that that's the only meal he's got. And he knows he needs that. Sometimes, in order to see a miracle in your life, you need to give away what you need the most. You don't like that, do you? Well, that's the truth. That's how miracles begin. That's why you always talked about the widow who gave 2 mites. What she gave is little. But what she gave is what she needed. You get the picture right now? That's why God valued that more. When you give away what you need the most, irrespective of the size of what you give away, is when you see a miracle. I have a principle. You may not like this principle, but I think Capstone needs to learn this principle because I've seen how God can do this. When we began our church, sorry, I need you to stand there till I make the third point. When we began the Capstone, the first 3 years, Capstone did not pay me. But it doesn't matter. I didn't have, because of course, Capstone was not in a position to pay me at that time. But it didn't matter. In my life, and along with my wife, we made this principle. We talked to each other and we made a covenant with God. Whether I get my salary or not, I'm going to give my tithes. How is that possible? Have you ever thought about it? How is that even possible? Do you know in the Old Testament, when the farmers gave their tithes, they would give the first thing that came out, the first fruits. You know what it means, right? Harvest comes after the first fruit. They cut the first fruit. They don't do the harvest and then say, I'm going to give 10%. Please don't get that in your head. First fruits actually means whatever fruit came the first. You don't even know whether the second fruit will come or not. They cut that and they gave it to God, believing that God would give me the second and the third and the fourth and fifth. Now you understand how important you giving your tithes is to God. So sometimes God waits you to do a miracle till you give away what you need the most in your own life. Then you begin to see. Now I'm not talking about prosperity gospel. Please don't connect this to prosperity gospel. This is your duty, your responsibility to give to God because God is the one who's giving you. Everything else you give above that becomes your offering to God. Sometimes we don't even give what is required of us back to God. I'm not just talking about money. Please don't get that connection there. I'm just talking about every aspect of your life. We don't give back to God what belongs to God. Now, if you really want to see a miracle, not only you give back to God what you need to give to God, but you also give to God what you need the most to God in order to see a miracle. Will God do a miracle even if you don't do that? Yes. Because He loves the good and the bad the same way. If you really need it, God will do it. I have no problem with that. I don't think God is sitting there and saying, with tight fist, unless you give me, I'm going to do. No, He will do it. Even if you don't give. Because He is a faithful God. You got the connection? He is a faithful God. He can't stop being faithful to you. He will be faithful to you always. But what you and I will miss is that the joy of seeing what we give, which we need the most, being multiplied. That you will miss. This kid did not miss it. Not only he got his Happy Meal back, he saw that his Happy Meal fed 5,000 plus people. Let's say 20,000 people. That's a big meal. Do you know that? That's a big meal. Have you ever tried to feed 200 people in the church? Ask Brother Sam. Do you know how difficult it is to arrange food for you on a Christmas day or any of our anniversary programs? It becomes really a big nightmare. Just 2 days of Prem not being ready to arrange food for our VBS children has become a nightmare to our VBS kids. Imagine that with 20,000 people, but it just got done because one kid was willing to give away what he needs the most. Let me give you that example. That's why I asked them to just show you that. Hold that basket. Yeah. That'll be enough for you. You're putting on too much weight. Now, if I ask Nikhil to give me away one bread out of what he's got, do you think he'll be happy to give? If he does give me please. No, I asked you only one. Do you think it'll make any difference to him? It doesn't make any difference. It's just one. He might feel a little pinch if he's really a miser, but I'm sure he's not. He'll be happy. One is nothing out of the 10 that he's got, or 11 that he's got. If I ask him to give me away half, and he does give me, I'm sorry, I'm taking it. I know you have to hold it. Take half, yeah. Does he still have enough? He still has enough. I'm sure he doesn't need 5 anyway. But he still's got enough. So he can even save 2 of them. Even if he eats 3, still can save 3. Yeah, he's got 6. So even if he gives away 5 out of his 11, it still doesn't make any difference to him. It'll pinch him a little bit to part with so much. But he's okay. He can adjust. It doesn't matter, He still's got some money, enough for him to eat, enough for him to save. Okay? That's a principle we all work with. Because you got 11, you are willing to part with your tithes and your missions. Because you still got 6 more. That applies to Capstone, by the way, including me. But if you really want to see a miracle happen, then you go to Prasanna and ask him, can you give half of it? Can you? I know he's thinking twice, but he's a really good Christian, So he's giving. Hey, there you go. Thanks. We call this sacrificial giving. Isn't it? But he needs a miracle. So God says, can I have the other half? The other half, the entire half. Yeah. That's when this happy meal becomes food for 20,000 people. That's what he did, the kid. He gave what he needed the most. To be willing to be part with half of what you have, even though it is less, it's great. But to give away what you have completely, even though you need it the most, is the seed for the miracle, the actual miracle. So if I give 5 and expect God to do a miracle to fill it up, sorry, I'm going to disappoint you. Actually, God is going to disappoint you. Anyway, I don't do miracles. You got to be willing to be that. Like the little child. You can go. You can keep it there. Let me take one step more to give you one radical thought before I come to conclude everything. If you want to see a miracle, you got to give what you love the most. You got to give away what you need the most. But here is the clincher. Verses 11. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. Also the fish, as much as they wanted. The most harmless words in the Bible, if you read that. Jesus took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it. So, it's very simple. I want you to think with me. Jesus took 5 loaves, gave thanks to God. For what? If you read the entire verse just like that, you will miss the entire point. Jesus took the bread and gave thanks. Again, for what? He gave thanks for what he does not have. I don't know if you see that. He's saying, God, thank you for feeding 20,000 people with 1 bread. That's not possible. But he gave back to God as thanksgiving what he doesn't have. believing that God would actually do it. Hey, sometimes your miracle requires that. To be willing to give away what you still don't have. Do you know that's really difficult to do? That's what faith offering actually means. I don't know if you ever heard the word called faith offering. I ask you sometimes when you give for missions, I tell you, even if you don't have, write it down on a piece of paper that this is what I'm going to give this year for missions. You may not have it. But we ask you to do that because we are helping you to see that just by writing a sheet, something on a small paper, you would actually see how God does miracle in your life and through you in somebody else's life. Sometimes God needs you to do that, and Jesus showed it. It is possible. You take one loaf of bread, and give thanks to God for 20,000 people. And it can be given to 20,000 people unto the full. So much full, how many left over? 12 baskets. Let me conclude with that verse. So then Jesus said to his disciples, verses 12 I think, said, go collect all that is left over. And they collected him because he didn't want anything to go waste. How many were there? 12. So you saw a new arithmetic, right? 5 plus 2 plus x is equal to 5,000. In our case, 20,000. Imaginative case, 20,000 are 12. That's the new algebra equation that he taught them. The x factor is God. The x factor is Jesus. 5 plus 2 plus Jesus can feed anybody or anything. Even if it's not just 20,000 people, it can even feed a country. If you give your 5 and plus 2. That is possible. But the 12 baskets is what caught my curiosity, and I will conclude with that thought. Okay, think with me. Why did Jesus ask them to collect the 12 baskets? Why did he do that? In Numbers, he asked them not to collect. God says, don't collect anything. But here, Jesus says, collect. The reason God told them not to collect anything is because God wanted to tell them, hey, I'm going to take care of you every day of your life. I'll give you enough for you to eat. What you need, I'll give you. Don't worry about that. But here, by asking them to collect, Jesus taught a very important principle for us. That these 12 baskets are the reminder now, every time you don't have food, remember the 12 baskets. It's not the 5 loaves and 2 fish. It's the 12 that we actually have to remember in the story. Every time you look at the 12 baskets, you know all things are possible. Every time you look at those 12 baskets, the pieces that were left over. He wanted to do that because we forget what God does. You see, they forgot the 4,000 being fed, so he had to ask them, now collect it, so that every time you look at those baskets, you remember what I can do in your life, through your life. You know, that's why we are asking you to count your miracles. I've got 2 letters in the last 4 weeks. Who's 2 males, just 2 males. That means only 2 people are counting their miracles. Only 2 people. In a church of 200-300 people. 2 people believe in miracle because they saw a miracle happening in their life. They're willing to share it. If you don't share it, you're not even allowing God to do another miracle in your life. I don't know why you didn't get that. Here is the point. Sharing your miracle, collecting your 12 baskets does 2 things. 1, you loan your faith to others. When you stand up and say, this is what God has done in my life because I believed in it, others who are sitting there will learn from you. They loan your faith for their own miracle. But if you are sitting on the opposite spectrum and somebody is actually standing here and sharing their testimony, or I'm reading somebody's testimony for you, you're borrowing it from them. You're borrowing faith from others so that you can see your own miracle in your life. That's why we asked you to share your miracle. We asked you to write down your miracle. Not because I'm curious about your life stories, but because that actually helps you to see a miracle. That actually helps you to build up faith for the next one. If you're choosing to ignore what God has done, if you're choosing not to remember what has done, I think that's why the numbers are really important there in that story. It's really funny that the quails, by the way, imagine that 1,126 square miles of quails all around you, 3 feet high, even taking the bare minimum size of a quail, you're talking about 105 million quails one single day. That's a lot of quails. I think sometimes God purposefully asks us to number stuff so that you can remember those numbers and say, hey, if he has done that before, he can do it next. I know we are only talking about 7 miracles in the John, but John also has another miracle in his book, 8th miracle. At the end of the book, where Jesus performed a miracle of catching the fish. You know, they've gone back to their fishing and they were not able to find fish. So they worked all night. Jesus now comes at the shore, stands there and tells them, cast your net on the other side. All night they worked in the same sea. Now Jesus says, you're casting on this side. Why don't you cast it on the other side? The ancient boat in Galilean Sea would be around 7 feet wide. Just 7.2 feet wide. If you really want to be, exact measurement. 7.2 feet wide, could be 90 inches. Now Jesus is saying, take this net out and put it on the other side. Your miracle can be just 90 inches away, you know that? But because you're not willing to take this net out from here and cast it on the other side, you're not seeing that. Did you know after they caught the fish, they counted them? 153 fish. Interesting. I still can't figure out why that number. And we don't need the mystery behind the number. Maybe we'll go to heaven and ask him, why 153? But I guess the point of asking them to count itself is to remember what God is doing in your life. What God has done in your life. If you don't, you forget, so therefore you are confused in the future. But if you do remember, you have confidence instead of confusion in the future. That's the difference. 90 inches difference between you and your miracle. You might miss it. Don't miss it. Let's close our eyes. Think through what I've talked about today. Is God asking you to take the first step, little step? I know you believe me for big things, but you will see a miracle when you obey me in little things. Maybe that's the little thing he's asking you to do, to give away what you love the most. Maybe for some of you, what you need the most. But some of you who have strong faith, God is saying, hey, give away what you don't have in faith. Because God cannot give back what you don't give away. Maybe that's the lesson for you today. To give away what you love, to give away what you need, or maybe to give away what you don't have right now. If that's what God is speaking to you, and you know that God spoke to you right now, and you want to say, God, I want to help me to do. Would you stand wherever you are, if that's your prayer? It's really tough for me right now to give away, but I want to, God, because I want to see a miracle right now in my life. I love this the most. I can't give it away, but I'm choosing to give it away. I need this the most right now. I don't know if I give it away, I don't know if I ever get back, but I want to give it away, God. If you want to say that, help me, God. Would you like to stand to your feet? Doesn't matter where you are. Thank you. Size doesn't matter. Just 5 loaves, 2 fish, maybe 2 mites, like the widows. Just a pinch of your olive oil and little flour. That's all you have. But you want to give it away. That is the thing that you need right now, today, but you want to give it away. It's difficult, but you want to give it away. You will see a miracle, trust me. Thank you very much for standing. If you want to give away what you don't have, you know that God is impressing upon your heart. By faith, take that step. I don't have it right now in my hand. I can't see it, God, but I know that one day I'll have it. I want to give it away to you. I don't know how I'm going to get it, but I'll give it away to you. By faith, you would see a miracle. Thank you. Thank you. Let me take a moment to pray for you at this moment. Father, I want to thank you for speaking to us through your word. Your word is always powerful, God. It always challenges us, opens our mind to see new things. And today, we want to thank you for speaking to us, God. I pray that, God, as we stand, many of us here, we're standing right now, saying, God, I love this most, but I want to see a miracle, so I'm giving it away to you, God. Little act of faith, obedience, God. One little thing you're asking me to do, and I'm going to do this because I want to see the big thing from you. I give it away. Even I need it the most, but I'm giving it away because I believe you can provide me. And I know that this is what you're asking me to do. I pray for those who are doing that, God. They need it the most, but they're choosing to give it away. May their oil never run dry, God. I pray for those who are in faith, standing up and saying, God, by faith, I'm going to give away. Right now, I don't have it, but when I have it, I'm going to give it away to you. They're standing there with that kind of faith. I pray that you would honor their faith and show them that not only you will use their lives to bless others, but the blessing would always come back, boomerang back to them. Your word teaches us so many beautiful new things, God. I pray that these things that we have learned, the principles that we have learned, would be impressed upon our hearts. I stand along with those who right now standing, some of them are still sitting down, making a decision. I pray that you would honor our commitment. You would see our heart and respond back to us, God. Thank you for speaking to us once again today. We bless you. In Jesus' name we pray. And everybody said, Amen. Amen.